Alright, so I wanted to make a video just about, I don't know, what's going on in the world right now, the state of the world. So, where is it headed? Well, it seems like we're just completely split up in a million different ways. It seems like there's first of all, it seems like there's a separate group of people that, for example, there's people who want to separate from modern society and just live off the grid because they're kind of fed up with normal society. But those kind of people have always existed, but it feels like more and more are doing it now. And you wonder why are they doing it now? Well, for the average person now, it's so much harder to just get by. Because, in North America, we used to have this really amazing thing called the middle class. And now the middle class is more like the poor class. There's really not much middle class left, because it seems that no matter what system we build, it's not sustainable. The biggest part about building any system is, can it be sustainable? Because I really do think that almost any system kind of works fine for the short term, really. They kind of just turn to crap after a while, right? Because it's like even something like a dictatorship, you think, whoa, well that sounds horrible. Well, what if it was a really good dictator who actually genuinely cared about the people, but then over time he got greedy or he lost his mind, or maybe he was good and always cared about people, but then he was taken over by another dictator, and then the second guy in charge really doesn't give a shit about people. He's just power hungry, and he wants, to really empower himself more than help out the people around. So if that's the case, then so you have this crazy dictatorship and you think this is horrible, but it can also be good if it's like or the same thing with like a king. Imagine if you have a king. People think, oh my God, can you imagine how horrible it would be being ruled by a king? Well, no. What if it's a really noble king who generally really wants his people to do well and prosper? So the problem is not really what kind of system we have, it's just are they sustainable? So I was looking back through, so when I was younger, we still kind of had a pretty decent middle class. Like it was like, I would say most people were relatively okay. Like they got by okay, because they're like when I was younger, almost all the people around me here kind of had like, they had like a normal size house somewhere in the suburbs or whatever. So, just like it was pretty regular. Now it's like the younger generation has pretty much given up on the idea of owning a home. That's not even a possibility for them anymore unless they're rich. Because before, the middle class owned homes. Now only the rich own homes. So when you have that switch, that's how you know the middle class is for sure gone. And what's crazy about that is that after a generation or two, they won't even remember the difference. It's like the younger generation now are like, wow, I won't be able to ever buy a house. I won't be able to afford a house. That's unfortunate, right? But then a couple of generations after that, they won't even know that was even a possibility, right? So they'll just be born into a system where that was never a reality. So they won't even really miss it because it'll just be normal to them. It's like nobody's buying houses. In fact, houses will probably be one of those legacy items you would hear about. It'll be like some sort of like thing you visit, like in a museum or something. Or look at this, when people used to live in individual houses. It'll be something you visit. It's like, now when we visit old old sites where people lived, and whatever you see there, stone houses or mud houses, whatever the hell you see there, you think, wow, this is how they used to live. For us, it'll be like they'll look back and think, wow, they used to live in these houses. And that'll be really like probably a thing of the past. So there's tons of people who just said screw it and they're living off the grid. But then for the most people, they're kind of going down a completely different route, which is like this sort of merging with machines and technology, and you know, people fear that everything's going to be under strict control. We're going to have like social credit scores. It's going to, you know, it's going to kind of turn more into like the way China is, you know? So there's this crazy divide of people who think the future is apocalyptic and it's all going to be controlled, and we're going to be microchipped, and 5G is going to kill us, and all this technology we're going to merge with it and lose our emotions, and we're just going to be these robotic creatures. And then there's people who said, no, I don't want any of that, and they're going off the grid. So there's this huge divide. And then on top of that, there's also like this sort of like metaphysical approach that's kind of similar to the off-the-grid approach, but also like in the metaphysical world, people believe that almost like, you know how there's multiple realities and different probable futures and parallel universes and all this. They kind of believe that there's two versions of Earth. There's like a 5D Earth and a 3D Earth. What that means is that there's like a fifth dimensional Earth that's evolving into a more peaceful, loving place that's all about nature and protecting the earth and living in harmony with the earth. And then there's like the 3D Earth that's about war, destruction, poverty, control, kind of like the way we kind of feel it now, the way we think it's going now. So a lot of people in the metaphysical community think that there's going to be this divide. There's going to be two different realities. Some people will live in the 5D Earth, and some people will live in the 3D Earth. Now, I know to some people that might sound funny or wacky, but you got to keep your mind open to anything, because if you don't already think that Earth and existence is funny and wacky and almost improbable, then, I mean, what can you really say, right? Because this right now is improbable, right? All of this is improbable. This is almost an impossibility. Just you existing is an impossibility. The odds of you existing are less than zero. It's nonsensical for you to even be here. So this is improbable and unimaginable. So why can't there be multiple Earths, right? I think the biggest mistake we can make is to limit ourselves with what we think is possible and giggle at it and be like, oh, that sounds like a fairy tale. Your existence is a fairy tale. Whether it's great or horrible, it's a fairy tale because it's like magical, like it doesn't even seem to make sense, right? Whether you're suffering or whether you're having a lot of fun, either way, the whole experience is kind of like magic, really, more than anything, because it's like it shouldn't even be possible for any of this to exist, but yet here you are. So there's this crazy divide between a lot of different people now. And of course, with the internet, that divide is so apparent and obvious now also because every single person has a voice. So you look around and it's basically just little clubs of different thought patterns. You know, it's like merging together into like almost like one consciousness. People who believe in this, people who believe in that, in a way where you could almost say that's almost like a universal consciousness of every thought pattern you could have all blended into one, you know? It's like, you know, before whatever you thought about anything, it kind of felt more like your own personal experience. But now, since you can form these thought bubbles on the internet, you know, I mean, people used to do that before too, in like little cults, little tribes, little communities, they always did that. But now it's like the reach is like you're talking about somebody in Australia, somebody in Alaska, and somebody in South America could all have the same thought pattern and talking to each other, communicating in a group. So we've never had anything quite like this. I mean, at least that we know of, right? Who knows, maybe there was a civilization before us a long time ago that had this kind of level of communication through an entire Earth. Who knows? But as far as we know, we've never experienced anything like this. So this is going to divide people even more because it puts us in these groups. And then, so then you look at the world right now and you think, what world am I living in right now? Because it's it just seems like it can go in any direction. At this point in time, really, like, it seems like anything's on the table, whether it's like a World War III, whether it's a nuclear bomb going off, whether it's another pandemic that's even worse than the one we had now. And when I say worse than the one we had now, I mean worse as in the entire world was locked down and people lost their livelihood, their jobs, their businesses, the stuff they worked for. I've never owned my own business. I don't have a business like this, but I can't imagine what it must have been like to just to work your entire life to build this little business you have, and then all of a sudden they're like, no, shut it down. No one's allowed to open their stores, and then you just lose your business, your whole life. And I think, like, maybe for some people it's hard to really process what that would feel like. I don't need to own a business to process what that feels like, because I can close my eyes and think about it, and it's just the thought of it. Just the thought of it is just like, you just want to die pretty much, because it's like, that's your whole life. The thing is, you can, there's a million different ways to approach life. You could just be just kind of free, not really attach yourself to anything. I have a business, one day it's here, one day it's gone. I have money, one day it's here, one day it's gone. And that's great, to live in that sort of nonchalant, unattached way from everything. But the reality is, people have stuff on earth that means stuff to them, whether it's their loved ones, whether it's a business they've devoted their whole life to build. And so it's devastating for people to lose these things. You know, you can say, oh, it's okay, they could just rebuild it. Well, it's not always that easy. It's not, that easy answer is not always that easy. Just like, oh, well, just redo it. Maybe somebody doesn't have the money to redo it. Or maybe it was so hard to redo it the first time they can't even do it again. Like, look at what they say about the moon landing. You know, people wonder why there's so many conspiracies about the moon landing, whether we went there or not, whatever the hell you believe. But like, apparently we lost the technology to go back to the moon. Apparently, when we went to the moon back in the day, we worked on all this and we had it all planned out, and we went on the moon, and apparently we lost the technology to go back on the moon. That's what I've heard. I don't know if this is true, but just hearing that makes you laugh, because you think to yourself, yeah, or whatever you built, whatever business you built, maybe you can't rebuild it anymore. You just don't know how to do it again from scratch, because there were just so many little moving parts that sometimes you do something in life and you think to yourself, I don't even know how I did that. I don't even know if I'd be able to do it again. In every aspect of life. You can talk to a successful comedian and they could be like, I don't even know how I did it, and I'm not even sure if I'd be able to do it again. You know, like being on the road for the first 10 years, driving to little clubs, doing comedy for 10 people. No one gives a shit who you are. You're horrible at it. It takes you 10 years even to get reasonably good at it. You're just traveling in your broken car from city to city, sleeping in shitty cockroach-infested motels. And then somehow, years later, you make it, and you're doing good, and you wonder, how the hell did I do all that? It's kind of like that. Sometimes maybe you open up a business and you don't even know how to start from scratch again, or you might not even have the energy to start from scratch again. So I look at the world right now, and I wonder to myself also, where do I belong in this craziness? Because I don't know. Well, first of all, I've never known where I belong in this world, because to me, the world never made sense. From the time I was little, I always thought everything was backwards. It just felt like the world was not as it should be. And maybe that other world is possible. That other world where it's like... See, the main problem we have is that, as far as the world being crappy, is that it's always been this way, because what happens is people... Any form of system we come up with relies on some sort of power to somebody, whether it's a dictator, whether it's a government, whether it's police officers, whether it's judges, whether it's politicians, whether it's presidents. And when you give power to anything, it ends up being corrupt. It's actually not humanly possible to have any form of power that doesn't end up corrupt. So this idea of like, oh, we're living through crazy times. No, it's always been crazy times. Only difference now is what? Like, it's just like a different version of a crazy time. And even with all the craziness and the corruption, capitalism kind of, for a lot of people, worked really good for a pretty long. It had like I said, every system kind of works for a while till it falls apart. Of course, in North America, lots of people were middle class, everyone could afford to buy a home, and then all of a sudden now nobody could afford anything. And you think, what happened? Well, capitalism is unsustainable because it's designed off of infinite growth. So eventually it's just going to collapse on itself. You can't have this idea of infinite growth forever. It's just not sustainable. You can't bleed the earth forever with infinite. It just the way we went about it was not sustainable at all. Like, all we really did was just polluted the earth, and then we just polluted the earth, and then what we did is eventually the system became unstable, and we have nothing but rich and poor people, which is what happens with all the systems. It's like they always end up being corrupt eventually. And I'm not saying that any of the other systems work any better, whether it's communism, socialism, because every kind of system is leading towards something. There's no system. Nothing stays still. So you're always slightly going into one direction or the other. Nothing stays still. So whatever kind of system you have, eventually it'll go one way or the other. And the way they usually go is down, simply because every form of system relies on some sort of power, and then that power gets corrupt. So that's why they eventually all kind of collapse. But yeah, sure. Would I like to, if I lived on an earth that kind of figured out a way that we could be all connected into one world, have billions of people, and not be corrupted? Not because that's really it's just corruption. That's it. Because to form any sort of system, we need to place people in power, and that's what we haven't figured out. That's the question. Can we have any sort of system? And this is why people believe in stuff like anarchy and stuff. I remember when I was young, I didn't really know much because I don't really read much. I'm not an educated person. I'm not gonna quote interesting facts from like some book I read or anything like that. So I just observe to see what's going on. And I lost my train of thought there. I didn't even know what I was trying to say, but what the hell was I even saying? I said that. Okay, what was I? What kind of system we could have? I don't know what kind of system we can possibly have where we have billions of people. I was talking about anarchy, now I remembered. I was saying how, when I was younger, I didn't know much about anarchy. To me, I just thought anarchy was just like, oh, you're just like literally causing chaos. You're just like some rebel on the street banging a drum and breaking windows and causing chaos. It's all anarchy. That's what you imagine. You just imagine riots and people. But it's not really that. It's just the idea that, that people have their own power, that we don't need to give that power to an organization or a leader or like something like that. Can a system like that work with 7 billion people? I don't know what kind of system will work, I don't know what kind of system will work. I just know that whatever we have now doesn't work. That's clear, right? And it's like, here's the thing. In small, if you ask me, like, what is a system that works? Well, what works is small. The problem with all these systems is that they don't scale. That's the problem, because if you have 100 people living on an island together, they can figure it out. They can figure it out. A small little tribe can figure it out. The problem is when you have people everywhere trying to organize that, because to live in a society, there's structure to it, right? To live in a society. Just imagine what it means to live in a society. Let's say there's 10,000 people or 50,000 people or 1 million people wanted to live in a society. You can call this society a country, you can call this a state, you can call it whatever you want. How do you organize it? What are the rules? right? You'd have to have some sort of rules in a society, right? Otherwise, it's just like everyone's just, what do we do? So it's just like, who makes these rules? Who enforces the rules, right? Because the second you start forming a society and having rules, that's when you start going into debates like the way we have it, like when a drug is illegal. Like, let's say you want to smoke weed or eat mushrooms or take LSD. Like how can someone tell you what you're allowed to put in your own body? And someone will say, well, you live in a society. There has to be rules, and these are the rules. So that's when you start getting into like that, your personal freedom. Like what personal freedom am I willing to give up for a set of rules so society stays together and is organized? That's really the question. How much of your freedom are you willing to give up to have some sort of organized society? Right? Because any organized society has some sort of rule set. Otherwise, nothing gets done. Imagine even something like as simple as a rule set as in like your mail doesn't get delivered. Like, like imagine if somebody said, it's like, well, the postman is like, well, I'll just deliver when I'm in the mood. I don't want to be controlled. I don't want anyone to tell me when I have to deliver the mail, right? It'd be chaos. Like there's a rule set so things get done. Or imagine the train. You want to take the train at 4 o'clock. But the guy controlling the train is like, I don't want to arrive at 4 o'clock. I'm not in the mood. No one can tell me what to do. So I'm just going to like arrive at 6. So people have to wait 2 extra hours by the train station before I pick them up, right? So it's like everything has to have some sort of rule set. And when you break the rules, who enforces it? So that's when you start getting it. That's why people are anarchists. So that's why people are libertarians or whatever. They want something more free because it's like, who the hell are you to tell me when I can do this and when I can do that? So they reject that. So there's a paradox involved in it because if we want to have any sort of society, it's got to be some sort of rule set. And if you have a rule set, who enforces that rule set, right? So the whole thing is, it's like, yeah, what kind of system can we create on a large scale? Because like I said, on a small scale, it's very manageable on a small scale. Because also what happens on a larger scale, the reason it's so much easier to be corrupt is because you're faceless. People become faceless on a large scale. Even though, yes, we're all connected and everything, but we're still kind of faceless. It's like you can kind of, you don't have to, because if you live in a small community of 100 people and you act like an asshole, you have to see those people every day. Or if you live in a community of 100 people and you're not caring towards the others in the community, or you don't really care about them, or you're kind of selfish. People will spot that right away, and you'll either be outcast from that little tribe, or people just simply will not like you. You'll just be alone, right? But on a large scale, you can make millions of dollars, and you don't have to really care if anybody likes you. You can just be like, screw off. I made a lot of money, and I'm just going to do whatever I want. Like buy hookers, prostitutes, live on islands, have sex with any girl I want because I could just throw money at her. You just feel powerful. You feel like this world is yours. You control it. It's just your little playground. You kind of lose yourself in that lust of just the power of like, hey, I can do everything I want. Who cares if people like me or not? I can just be an asshole because it's just my world. I'm living in it, baby, and I just do what I like. Fuck everybody else. If it brings me pleasure, that's all that matters. You kind of become very hedonistic, or is that what it's called? So that's sort of what I've been seeing in the world as of late. Just everyone's divided in their own groups, no matter what they believe in, just arguing over what's better, what's worse, who's right, who's wrong. And I kind of just see it all as just monkeys just throwing shit at each other, because we're all just monkeys in our little tribes throwing shit at each other because we don't, we think that our tribe, our group has the answer, and we're just like, it's all you see. It's like if you go anywhere, like I don't really use social media much, but if you go on Twitter, you go anywhere, it's just people throwing shit at each other. So where is the world headed? I don't know. If I had to guess, like as far as what I feel intuitively, I would say there probably is just infinite probabilities. So as far as where it's headed, it's probably headed in every direction you could conceive. There's probably probable future universes where there's a World War III. There's a probable future universe where all the wars stopped and we live in peace and somehow we figured it out. That's a dilemma of a civilization. Will they evolve past warring, or will they kill themselves off? Because you can really see humanity going either way. We might just kill ourselves off, and we start from scratch again. I don't think even if we had a World War III, I don't think everybody would die. I think there would always still be like a little tiny group of people that would survive and rebuild. And in that tiny group of people that would rebuild, that would be their dilemma. Will they eventually one day evolve past this? Because that's what we are. It's what I always repeat. We're basically like babies with bazookas, We've evolved so rapidly, like technology-wise, but we haven't evolved spiritually in any sort of way to handle that kind of technology. This is why there's mass shootings. This is why there's wars. This is why there's like violence. This is why there's control. This is why, because we're incredibly smart enough to build advanced technologies, but we're not wise enough, we're not spiritually grown enough to handle that kind of responsibility, to have that kind of power. Imagine giving a bazooka to a baby and being like, okay, be responsible with this. Good luck. In fact, a baby would probably be more responsible with it than probably the adults we have ruling the world. But so that's the question. Will we evolve? Because imagine you look at the world, right? And you imagine all the planets out in the universe, and you think all the intelligent life that lives there. The question's always like, did they evolve past the primal instincts of survival, war, domination, control, and get to a really amazing place, or did they die off? Because really, that's the stepping stone to really get to the next side. And I sometimes wonder what that number would be. Like, out of all the civilizations that evolved, how many of them get past that primal stage of war, domination, and survival to get onto the other side? And that other side, as in like peace, higher level of spiritual growth, where you get to a point where like the idea of wanting to hurt another human being is crazy to you and nobody would do it. Not because you're perfect, not because you're just like this all-knowing perfect being, but you're just simply evolved enough to realize that the idea of like wanting to hurt someone else doesn't even cross your mind. Like, you might be annoyed at somebody, you might not get along with everybody, because I think even if you're very evolved, two people can have very different personalities and they could just not be very compatible. And you could just simply be like, okay, well, I'll go my own way, you go your own way. But it never results in you guys beating each other up or wanting to kill each other or hurt each other or cause damage to the other person. That kind of evolved. I'm not talking about some sort of utopia. Because utopia is like the same as saying infinity. It kind of means nothing. It's an empty sort of idea, utopia. So, but just a place where people are evolved enough where when they look at another person, they feel that when they look at that other person, it's like looking at themselves. So it'd be kind of crazy to want to punch yourself in the face. So why would you punch the other guy in the face, right? Because even sometimes you're upset at yourself or you're disappointed in yourself. But you don't punch yourself in the face. You just say, well, okay, I need to work on that, and you move on, right? So until we get past that violence and that control and domination, we're going to keep probably repeating the same cycle over and over again. Civilization after civilization, they get power, they prosper, and then they collapse because all our forms of power end up being corrupt. So we'll see. There's different types of people. Some people say that I'm an eternal optimist. Some people say this. I just see it as like anything's on the table all the time, anytime. Even your own life. I'm talking to you right now, and I'm fully aware tomorrow or today, my entire life could completely change. Like, anything could happen. I could just, literally anything can happen. Anything. Absolutely anything can happen at any moment of any day. And those possibilities are always there. A lot of times we pretend they're not there because psychologically it might really mess us up. People, every time people ask me, how do you think this is going to turn out? I always say it could turn out any way. It could turn out in an infinite amount of ways. Just like your own life. If somebody asks me, how do you think my life will turn out? It can turn out in an infinite amount of ways, I think. All possibilities are on the table. So I look at the world right now, and it seems incredibly divided. Some people are saying it's even going to get worse, and it's like, yeah, it probably could get worse, but it could also get better. Like I said, anything is on the table. I think we just live in an infinite reality of infinite potential and infinite possibilities, and it's always there. And listen, I would love to live in the reality. Remember how I was saying before how some people in the metaphysical community believe that there's like going to be two different distinct Earths, a 3D Earth and a 5D Earth. I would love to live in a 5D Earth because I'll admit I got my experience in the 3D Earth. It's actually a very useful experience. Even suffering and pain, you must go through that. If you're somebody who's never suffered or gone through pain, you're basically, you can't understand anything. You just can't. Fundamentally, you cannot understand anything unless you understand the opposite of it. You have to. And that's what this 3D reality gives us. Perspective, more than any other reality. If you think, what is the king of realities? It's really Earth. Earth is a place with no delusion. Why is that? Well, Earth is like the center of existence almost, in a way where we're right in the middle of every possibility. Because imagine if you were born in a very, like a magical higher dimension where everything's peaceful and loving. You're kind of also living in delusion because you don't understand all of reality. You have no idea what it means to suffer, to feel pain, to do anything like that. So you're really living in delusion. You're kind of sheltered. It's very similar to like a child who's sheltered by their parents and they never experience anything because they just want to keep them safe. So what they did is they did keep them safe, but also completely sheltered them from reality. So they kind of live in their own delusion. But Earth is at the center of every possibility. You can stare in any direction and see heaven and hell all at the same time. That's crazy. There is no delusion on Earth. You get to see, sometimes people say like, this is all an illusion. Well, it's the most fucking honest illusion there is, because you get to understand every aspect of existence, from the most unbelievable pain and suffering to the most unbelievable joy, because you can see them both on Earth. You can basically have heaven on Earth and you can have hell on Earth all at the same time. And it's like the only place that offers that. This type of reality that's basically a blend of heaven and hell is the only type of reality that can give you that kind of understanding and perspective. And if you've never experienced that, you can't possibly really truly understand existence and reality. So as much as I've experienced it and I understand it, I'm good. I'm like, okay, I got it. I've experienced it. Yep, I got the lesson. I know what it feels like. So, if me personally, myself, enters a more 5D kind of reality, that's more like peaceful, loving, people don't want to hurt each other. Yeah, I'm ready for that because I got what 3D reality was like. A lot of lessons to be learned, a lot of growth, a lot of understanding, a lot of perspective. But a lot of people are kind of ready. They're like, we're good. We got the idea. Let's move on. So yeah, that's what I'm hoping for. I'm hoping for that we move on to something more enjoyable, but it was a worthy experience to experience the craziness of the 3D reality of Earth, all the pain, all the suffering, all the war. Because like I said, without that, you'd be delusional and you wouldn't have a full understanding of the possibility of what it means to exist. So we've experienced it. We're good. We got it. We understand it. Now let's move somewhere better. So that's what I'm hoping for. And I'll just leave it at that. So I hope you all have a beautiful day. Bye.